Okay, hello everybody. Back here to talk a little bit about mixing and mastering and finishing your tracks. So, first of all, I don't want you to get too sucked into this. So, if you're still racing to actually finish building out the whole track and like making the full thing, focus on that. Send me drafts. I can help with revisions. That's the most important thing. Ultimately, if it's sounding good to you, great. So the short version of all of this is once you are if you're gonna be if you're at a if you've managed your time such that you're gonna be in a place where you are finishing your track the night before, then ultimately my advice to you is don't worry. You can honestly skip this video, and I would just say the main thing you're going to want to do is just a that next morning, right? Give yourself a little break, and then that next morning or whatever, just try to listen to your track on a different pair of speakers, hopefully a different format of speakers. So if you're on earbuds, listen on headphones, maybe try listening. If you've been doing stuff on earphones and headbuds, maybe try doing stuff on a Bluetooth speaker. Just listen again on a different format of speaker, ideally even two different types of speakers, but at least listen at least on one, and then you may hear your track. Certain things may sound slightly different, and then you can go back, and most mainly you're just thinking about volumes, right? You just may notice that, oh, the volume of that, you can't really hear this thing super well, or this section sounds a lot quieter, or the kick was a lot louder, right? And so mostly you're just thinking about volumes, listening on different speakers, and again, taking that little break will allow you to kind of see things fresh. So that is really the level of like mixing that I want you to be doing if you're still really working on your tracks. Now, for those of you who maybe are kind of in the stages of finishing things, again, you can try out some of this stuff. Again, I did want to just leave you guys with a little bit of knowledge, like a very, very, very brief little look at kind of some mixing stuff. So mixing, of course, is, you've done the arrangement, right? So you've written all the things, you've arranged them, they're all over the place. And now the question is, mixing really is about getting everything kind of to sound exactly as you might want it to. Again, this might not make that much sense because you're like, well, it does sound the way I want it to. If you think about back in the day when they're recording instruments, right? The recordings might not be exactly like how people are imagining or how things are sounding when they're coming out of amplifiers or people are singing or whatever. So there was a little bit more of a need for someone to come and glue everything together. We still obviously are wanting to do that. A lot of you guys have probably been doing kind of some of the mixing stuff, the volumes, etc., as you have been going along. But it can be really useful to separate these two processes so you're not trying to do two things at the same time. And again, also, as you listen on different speakers, right, you may realize there are certain adjustments you might want to make. So for those of you who have the time or are interested in kind of taking your track a little bit, giving it that extra 5-10% bump, here's some stuff you can do. So Maya, has one of our students has very kindly allowed me to use their project here. Thanks again. This is not, I've sort of messed it up a little because we sort of started to clean it up in class. So this is not exactly what it looked like. But yeah, so basically, first thing you want to do is just go to File, Save Live Set As, and make a new version. I'm not going to do that here, but if I was, I would say make Montreal 2. Honestly, actually, why don't I do that? Just make another one. Okay, there we go. Montreal 2. Right, so then you don't have to worry about, if I mess things up too much, I'm not going to change them back, right? You have something saved. The next thing you want to do is go through and just take a look at like what's on every track, because what you may notice, and again, I've sort of artificially created this situation, but you may notice as you're building it, I had like this old version of the melody that I'm no longer using. That track is muted, so maybe I'm going to delete that. Or like, here's something I was thinking about adding in, but I didn't, so like I'm going to delete that track, right? Or, oh, here's like some stuff I was chopping up from this bigger sample that I've now muted or whatever. So, right. So I'm just going to first go through and just, you may see, okay, here's like another thing that, or did we turn that? Actually, no, that. Oh, yeah. Right, here's like another thing that I turned off, right? So you may even notice just some like, a lot of times I just find some like blank audio tracks, right? So go through, just delete all the stuff you're no longer using or is no longer necessary. And then the next thing you're going to want to do is go in and just really quickly, I'm hitting S to solo here, and I am just listening, and I am just going to go through and give everything a descriptive name, right? So here, oh, sorry. Okay, so this is like pad. Oh. And then if you hit, so you can hit Command R to rename, and then when you hit Tab, it will go to the next thing. So I'm going to go here. Okay, so this is like strings. Call this like marimba. Snare. Flute. Okay, great. Kick. Cello. And then I think some of these I just kind of left here. So we'll call these like toms. Yeah, so I think the rest I had already labeled, right? But go through, label everything. And then you're also going to want to then go through and organize things by what's kind of like most important. And by most important, I don't mean most important to the track, because that may be a sample or vocal, but kind of what's really forming the base of that rhythm. So for a lot of you making more electronic or hip hop influenced stuff, the kick is going to be like the kick and the snare are going to be really important, and then potentially like a bass element if there's a major bass element. But here maybe it's this pad, right? What are the things that are really like making up like kind of the most important to the backbone of the track? What is really the foundation of the track? Maybe not the things the listener is paying attention to the most, right? But the things that, if you're on a dance floor, are really going to be moving you, right? Or making up some significant portion of things, right? So get some stuff in here. And then, as we go along, right, we kind of maybe have some of our higher end sort of instruments, samples, and then, as we get to the end, maybe more of these little, you can see these like little effects and things like that, little vocals, maybe additional drums. So kind of arrange things. And then what you're going to want to do is you can click and shift click to select everything, drag all the volumes down to -infinity at once, and then go to your kick, and you can hit delete to get that back up to 0. And then you want to go to the busiest part of the track, right? So the part where the most number of things are playing, right? And now it's just the kick. And now you can sort of bring everything up relative to the kick. Yeah. So again, I hope you're doing this on like a different day to the last time you worked with the track. When you first open this project, you might want to just listen through the whole thing and maybe take some notes on like which instruments are really driving where you're at. But again, at this point in the process, you'll know you're ready for this when arrangement wise, you're like, okay, there's nothing else. I don't want to be changing any notes. I don't want to be adding anything, right? Now everything is kind of set in stone, right? I don't want you editing any of the like actual stuff you can see on the screen here. Yes, maybe you're going in and messing with some of the sounds, reverbs, some of that, little bit of that stuff, but like you shouldn't really be changing anything that's actually in these timelines. That is kind of, you want to commit to that and you're sort of locked into that. Okay, so yeah, so again, most of mixing for your purposes should really just be thinking about dialing in volumes. What we want to do is now bring up the next instrument relative to the kick, right? So I'm going to do that very slowly, and I'm going to try and not worry about the number. I'm just going to more try to listen. Oh, sorry. Okay, I think that's good. And as I was saying with this project, for a lot of you guys, I think there's a tendency to want to add a lot of reverb to things that make things sound good. So maybe go back in, look at your reverb, maybe dial it back slightly, especially for these more kind of bass sort of foundation elements. We don't want them to be too lost in reverb. And again, I was bringing up the volume. It can also be good to kind of overshoot a little and then bring it back down as well. So for this pad, we'll bring it up until it feels like it's too loud, and then we'll kind of bring it back to a good level. Right? And again, you might be wondering, well, how loud should things be? Again, just use kind of your intuition. You don't have to worry about this too much. You will move quickly because you will have a chance to go back and really make tiny little adjustments and stuff as you're listening on all your different speakers and stuff. So you can move pretty quick right now. Okay, so go through, get everything up, and the purpose of also doing that is that you may realize there are certain things that have gotten kind of lost in the mix or you don't need anymore, are redundant, and so it can also be a chance to strip things, back. Now, this is generally sounding pretty good, but what you may notice, and I think with this track, you could just get everything dialed in with just the volumes. You may notice that you have certain elements that are starting to clash a little in certain areas of the frequency spectrum, right? If there are both a bunch of low-end elements or a bunch of mid-range elements, and there are kind of a bunch here. I think like one thing that you could maybe hear is like, okay, this beginning part of the flute is maybe adding kind of this low-end rumble that maybe we like, but maybe we don't want. Let's kind of listen. Right, so if I turn that off. So I think here, okay, well, I guess we had already sort of thrown that in, but so I'm going to turn that on. Right, so if we listen to this, right, there is actually all this other stuff that's sort of getting lost. Now, we don't necessarily want to take that out. We want to listen and think, oh, does that kind of add? But as I'm listening with the whole mix, right, it's kind of just like this part where we're getting that kind of flute swell, right, that we really want. So we could think about getting an EQ. So we can use this EQ8. And so what this is this, right, represents the whole frequency spectrum, and we can use it to isolate certain things. So this one, right, so maybe what we want to do is we want to turn down or start to get rid of some of the low end. As you can see, this only goes so far down, so I'm going to change this to this kind of shape, right, and then we can sort of take some of the low end out here. so it's very subtle here. Honestly, it's like I can even really, only hear it a little bit in these headphones, right? This is not really doing that much to alter the sound for our purposes, right? So again, if you really feel like there's something that's really clashing there, you can kind of go in and try and make some adjustments, right? Like maybe this has a little bit of mid-range stuff. But again, I think with volume leveling, you can sort of get away with most stuff. And again, if there are certain things you want to accentuate, you can kind of bring them up or down. But again, only if you're really feeling like, oh, okay, there's this kind of big issue here. And this, again, some of this stuff might become more clear as you listen to it on other speakers. Yeah. So yeah, then begin to go through so once you've done the busiest section, begin to go through the other parts of the song. And again, you may realize that you want things to be in a different volume for different places, right? And so for that, what you're going to want to do is like, say we want let's listen to this section. I guess it's right. Let's say for whatever reason we wanted the strings here to be quieter, right? So again, you might be like, well, if I bring it down over here, then this part's not going to be as loud, right? So what you want to do is put in this thing called a utility, which I think if you go to your audio effects, well, yeah, it's called utility. You can find it. And what you can do is you can automate the gain here. So again, to do that, we're going to hit A, right? And then and then we're going to click on gain, and then this line will come up, and then we can sort of change this line. So maybe we can even have it kind of come in, right? So it's like I can use this line to, right, to really, to change things, right? And if you just click on this whole thing, you'll even see, if you click here, you will see these little like squares, and that's also an easy way to just work with the whole thing, right? So you could then put the volume down here, right? So then you can begin to go through the rest of the track, balance out the volumes, and then again, take a break, because the big thing here is that there's something called ear fatigue, which is very, very real, right? Which is that as you listen to things more and more, you are going to lose your ability to hear them correctly. And this is not just about the perspective and like sleep on it and whatever, but it is actually like a real psychoacoustic phenomenon with your ears. So don't be doing this mixing stuff for more than like 45 minutes, right? And if you are, make sure you take a 10-15 minute break before you get back to it, ideally waiting till the next day. But again, for a lot of you, it's just going to mean finishing the arrangement, being like, okay, good, I feel good about that. The next day, listen to it on a bunch of speakers, balance out some of the volumes, maybe do some volume automation. Again, I wouldn't even worry about the EQing stuff too much, and that should be pretty good. Now, you may have heard about something called mastering. Again, that's a whole nother kind of crazy thing. It mostly has to do at this point with like getting things to be well, it's kind of a final look at the song as a whole, but a big part of it also is getting things to be appropriately loud. So for your sake, you can do something super, super simple, which is if you double click on the master, you can then put a saturator on here, change it to digital clip, and then bump that up by not more than 5 or 6. It will depend how loud everything is in the first place, but I would basically just bump it up by a couple decibels and see if you bump it up too much, stuff will start to sound distorted. So I would listen. Right, and this will also start to give you a sense of like problem areas. Like I think you could sort of hear like more of the issue with this flute thing as we bump this up. right? So we've gone too far there. It's really loud. But I think something just like 3 just makes it a little louder, right? So maybe we're like, bring that down. Right, so yeah, I would just say bump that up by a little. That's just to make things a little louder so that compared to other, songs you hear, it sounds kind of like not too different in terms of its volume level. But yeah. Um, so yeah, that's pretty much it. But again, I really want you guys to focus on arrangement, and all that stuff. And, feel free to send me stuff to look at. And good luck. I'm really excited to see everyone's work on Friday.